Hello and good morning, everyone. My name is Adam. I'm now head of sales and marketing at the ISM. I'd like to welcome you to this webinar with us. It's a live webinar. It's the third in our series, and I never actually know where the camera is on my computer, so ignore me. I'd like to welcome three of our members. It's the first time that we've had three members who are all from different grades, and I'll introduce them in a few moments. There's Simon. He's a leader. There's Tamara, who's a fellow, and there's Martin, who is an executive. And I nearly forgot that. So this webinar is going well already. I do get very forgetful during these webinars, even though I have spoken to all of these guys a couple of webinars ago. I actually forgot one of the presenters' names. So the webinar this morning is on how furloughed employees can thrive, not just survive, but actually thrive. So before we get into that, I'd like to introduce and I'd like to welcome all of these presenters to now introduce themselves. So let's kick things off. Ladies first, Tamara.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining the conversation. I'm Tamara McMillan. I am currently a non-exec advisor to an organization called CSO UK, which curates thought leadership events for the most senior sales leaders in the UK and beyond. My most recent role was Executive Director of Sales for Virgin Media Business. And as the topic sort of suggests, I'm not furloughed, but I'm not currently gainfully employed. So puts me in a similar situation to perhaps many of you, and certainly those of us on the call. How do we make the most of this time? So I'm looking forward to sharing some different thoughts with you and also getting some of your
thoughts. Martin?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Martin Middlehurst. I currently work with Northgate Vehicle Hire, based up in Cumbria, and we're a vehicle rental business that specialises in light commercial vehicles. My role within that organisation is growing the sales portfolio for the Cumbria region.
And Simon.
Morning, guys. So Simon Murthwaite, currently a leader at the Institute of Sales Management. Fortunate enough to be a finalist for BESMA's Sales Professional of the Year last year. Over a decade within the sales and marketing arena, most recent roles with Owen Richards Marketing Group as the sales director there for over 3 years. I know he's done some webinars on here himself recently. Made the decision to leave late last year and started a new role with a want to move into the software market, unfortunately about a week before all this kicked off, and was then furloughed. Hence the hopefully part of the topic of the conversation today, and where we can help spread some joy a little bit, and also give some tips and hints about how to thrive during that situation.
Fab. So thanks very much for that, guys. We've got a couple of questions. We're looking at maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 questions. We should have these done in about 30, 40 minutes, and then it's open to questions, and then we'll answer those, and then we'll wrap it up. So first question is, how has it been going for all of you? How have you passed the time? How's your sort of mental health, which seems to be a massive topic at the moment? How's that going for you, and how have you been keeping busy? Have you got new hobbies? I know for one, I bought an Airfix model, and it's still in its packaging because I don't want to do it. It was a random, but to kick things off in this regard, how's it been going for you, Martin? Over to you.
Personally, it was challenging initially. So a bit of background: I recently returned from living in Australia for the past 4 years. Returned back to the UK in February. Fortunately, secured a new role at the start of March, and then, similar to Simon's situation, about 5 days in, I was furloughed. So that was certainly a shock to the system. And I think, like everybody, nobody knew how long this was going to last, what the outlook was, and for me, it was about mindset, but it was about conditioning. So making sure that the environment I'm in is essentially fit for success, and what that truly looks like, and everything that comes with that is your attitude, your feelings, your emotions, and really how those can impact what you've surrounded yourself with in your environment. So it was first and foremost making sure that I had the right environment for success, and I was conditioned that way. So that's really been the big thing for me. And on that journey, I picked up a lot of things. I've taken up some new personal hobbies, but I've also grown my network considerably, and that's been a very big mechanism for me to ensure where I am today in terms of my positive mentality.
Have you been reading anything? Have you been looking into any sort of articles or anything like that, or have you just it's always self-help?
Well, one of the first things I actually did was become a member of the ISM. That was about a couple of days after I was initially furloughed, and I wanted to get my feet into something and get stuck into something that would put me in a better position to return to the workforce, essentially. So, in short, yes.
Fab. And Simon, how's it been going for you?
I think it's always it's a challenge. I mean, inherently we're salespeople. I'd argue that the majority probably like to have a set routine and a process that they follow religiously. Again, bit of background, I left there at the end of last year, having had some conversations in the summer. And I took a little bit of time off. I took January and February, did a little bit of freelance, did some consulting for some businesses and clients I've worked with previously. I managed to find a fantastic role here in Exeter because there's a possibility of moving to London. Started on the very end of Feb, beginning of March. Had a week, 2 weeks in the office. We were told we were then going to work from home for a week, which I was well used to by that point. And then the furlough came into play. I think the first thing for me was to feel very fortunate, to feel grateful, and not to get political on this webinar at all, but that we do have such a fantastic government that's come and ploughed these options in for furloughed employers. I have family over in Italy, and they've certainly had much worse circumstances with the lack of support. So I think that was the first thing to feel grateful. I suppose mental health wise, and a good topic to cover with Mental Health Awareness Week this week, it's going to be a challenge. It's different, and I think it having no end date and it being a continuation, now we've got the furlough continuing until October, is always going to be difficult because it does take away a little bit of that focus. And again, all being salespeople, I would think that we all work to targets and we all work to that sort of focus. And I think one of the key things I had to do was kind of recalibrate a little bit. I was listening to Matthew McConaughey, and he was saying about being in St. Louis and in a position where there's a voodoo shop and there's potions on the shelf, and there's success, there's love, there's family, there's health, and there's money. And the money potion was always the one that was missing. Now, naturally, we're going to be money driven as salespeople. But I think it's about recalibrating that. We can't hit targets right now. We can't go and hit commission. We can't get that big deal in. So it was more about making sure that I've done that 5K run today, or trying to make sure that I've cooked that risotto that I've never managed to get quite perfect, or speaking to that family member who I haven't spoken to in years, and realigning what success looks like on a daily basis. And that's really helped me.
So looking after yourself first before going out into the market.
Yeah, I think it's a challenge when you're in the industry that we're all in, when it's fast paced, it is long hours, we work hard, it's success driven, and happiness will always come off of that emotion of success. That's what makes you happy and hitting that deal. And I think having all of that removed, when over a decade in sales and marketing, that's been my lifeblood and that driving force. So yeah, having to really recalibrate on where that feeling of happiness, that feeling of joy comes from, and finding other things to plug in that gap. And I've found that really useful.
And Tamara, what's your thoughts on that?
So I think I'm probably in a slightly different situation. Like Simon mentioned, I took time off after being made redundant due to some organizational changes we decided on. And so that feels great, doesn't it? Because it's sort of on your terms. You're really excited. New Year came. I was looking forward to the job market opening up as it usually does in the first quarter. And it was a bit of a slow start, but obviously it came to a crashing halt. And in our family, we've had my son's had some illness over the last couple of years. So in some ways, I've already been spending a lot of time at home. So for me, the transition of, from the fact that I had been, I wasn't currently really working, though I was kept quite busy with networking in CSO UK, it didn't feel as abrupt for me kind of going into the lockdown situation. I mean, maybe plan a bit better about getting groceries or something, but that change wasn't as significant. But what is different is I have 2 teenage children. And one of the things that Martin, Simon, and I had talked about prior to this event was part of what everyone experiences in furlough depends a little bit on the context of your living situation. Do you have kids at home? Do you not have kids? Are they school-age kids? Are they independent? Are you single? Do you live alone? Do you have a garden that you can get out in? And a lot of those elements made each of our experiences very different. So in my situation, I've got 2 teenagers at home. One's on a gap year. One was supposed to sit his GCSEs. So we obviously have had to think about that. So that's been interesting to balance in the home. My mother's here visiting from the US. She's 77. She's at risk. Her flights got canceled, so she's stuck here. So we have that as another element of care in the home. So I think from that perspective, it's been a little bit interesting to figure out what my role is in the lives of all these different people, whilst I also trying to, continue to do the webinars and engagements that I've had in the networking, and where does that fit in, and can I even really think very much about looking for a job at this time? What's my ability to focus and concentrate on, selling myself, which is ultimately what we have to do if we're looking for new work. So I found that a little challenging. The most rewarding, I think, similar to a lot of people, has been increasing my exercise routine. I have a spin bike at home, and so just taking a lot more time. And that's the way that I've sort of cared for my mental health, and it's made me feel like I can balance out the extra food and drink that seems to be getting consumed. So yeah, it's gone okay. I think it's getting a little harder. The longer it goes, you sort of forget what life was really like before, and you're sort of not sure what it's going to be like after. But it's going to be okay. I think overall, I see this as a really great opportunity for everyone, and counting our blessings, not our troubles, because we've all stayed healthy and well. So if we've got that, I think we're going to be all right.
Okay. In terms of, you're all working from home, you're all sort of trying to figure out your new routines, you're eating healthily, you're talking to your family in Italy, Martin, you got your mother over from America tomorrow. It's okay, isn't it, being furloughed? I guess it's never okay, but, being furloughed for a month, fine. 2 months, okay. 3rd month, you end up looking like David Hasselhoff, like me, with no haircut. 4th month, I don't know what month 4 even looks like. I mean, have you a plan if, this goes on and on and on? Worst case scenario, let's say we're still locked down in September, October. What's your plans then? How is it going to change? How are you going to keep mentally strong? What have you learned? Most of all, what are you doing that you're figuring out has not worked for you? And what have you done for things that has worked? People are saying things like, go and learn a new language and all that nonsense, but I've not really done that. With that in mind, in terms of an extended furlough period, just like to get your thoughts on that. As you ended the last session tomorrow, how do you feel about taking up on that mantle for this one?
I think it's hard to think about, because it still feels like something that you can't really plan. So on one hand, you have this piece of information, but you don't really know what that means. I imagine a lot of people will be thinking about, do they stay doing what they're doing in their furloughed state, or do they look for a new opportunity where the market may open up? Because we do like to be active and busy. It's hard to imagine being idle for that long. And whilst we are learning to cook new recipes, or we might be exercising a bit more, I think that desire for a bit more purpose and kind of like that Protestant work ethic, like we need to feel like we're contributing. I think that could be a bit tricky. And so, that would be my answer. It's a little bit difficult to think about furlough going that long. But what I do know is that businesses are going to continue, right? Business is going to be conducted. There's less business in many areas. Some are booming. So I think it's about trying to figure out how you can stay connected to the things that are positively happening. And that hopefully will help us get through, regardless of our individual, states.
Martin, do you have any thoughts on that? Or
yeah, I completely agree. I think people don't have the answers as of yet, and that's okay. And for me personally, what I've done is, as this has gone on and on, is I've just started to almost forget about how long the crisis is actually going to last, and thought about stripping that back some more and thinking, okay, well, let's start to set some small incremental goals. So that could be weekly or even daily if it has to be. And then start celebrating those along the way. It's okay to still celebrate things. And again, that goes back to mindset and keeping yourself healthy in that sense. So that's been a big thing for me, to be perfectly honest.
And Simon, any last thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think some of it will echo a little bit what the guys have already said. I think, we're so used to thinking month on month, year on year, quarter by quarter, that to think that far ahead right now, we're actually said, Adam, none of us, or particularly me and Martin here at the moment, we might not go back to work properly until November, potentially longer. So I think having that mindset of thinking that far ahead can almost be damaging. So certainly had to strip things back to that day by day. Just plan tomorrow. I'm going to go for a run. I'm going to go and I'm going to make this phone call. I'm going to speak to such and such, and just have that plan before you go to bed each night, I suppose, from a personal perspective. From a professional perspective, I think it's things like a second role, for example. I looked at fruit picking. I saw it on the news and I thought, I've never done that in my life. I'm probably never going to have the chance to do it again. I'm lucky enough to live in Devon, even though the accent doesn't sound too Devonshire. Why not? Why not go and meet some people that I've never met before in an industry I've never worked in or understood, and go and do something different? It's also helping that food process. There's also options for consultancy work, and I think one of the reasons that the three of us put this webinar together, there's a lot online at the moment about, continuing to build pipeline, continuing to work. Sales opportunities are still there. And I totally agree. For some businesses, that's the right thing to do. For some industries, for some markets, that's absolutely fine. But it's not the scenario for all. I think Martin mentioned before, certainly with LinkedIn, it's great to still be building those connections. One of the other things I did look at finally was, rather than spending a lot of time on L&D and training with sales webinars or sales podcasts, I've picked 2 or 3 industries of which I think for me will be target markets when things do go back to normal. And I've tried to listen to those industry-specific podcasts, webinars, blogs, done a lot of research through those so that when we do go back, I'm able to really speak their language and empathise with the situations they're in. I found that's really helped as well.
I think
sorry.
It is a time of reflection. So it's great because I think some of us will be thinking, do I want to still do what I've been doing? Are there new industries that I want to consider, or maybe something completely different? And in doing that, I think we do best prepare ourselves for how to come out of it. So on the one hand, maybe not thinking too far in the future, we can't control it anyway, and that can be burdensome. At the same time, there is this incredible opportunity to really think about what makes you happy, what are the things that you find fulfilling, what makes you feel more in control of your own destiny, and investing in those things, I think helps not only pass the time, but gives us back a little bit of control that I think we all feel, that we've lost control during this time, because so many things we can't control, but we can control how we spend our time and what we focus on and the attitude that we have. So, yeah.
Well, clearly my neighbours decided to do some gardening in the middle of this webinar, so I'll have to go out and tell them to stop in a minute. I might actually, the windows are shut as well, but hey-ho, sorry, I know where he lives. Right. So you mentioned something about LinkedIn building connections for the future in terms of going back to work. 1 minute, 2 seconds.
Hold that
We're leaving again.
Oh, he's gone.
No, that really didn't do anything. I kind of just shut another window and put double glazing. Right. I wasn't going to go and swear at him. Don't worry. You spoke about. I mean, this. You're going back to this now, rather than losing it at my neighbour. You talked about sort of Martin touched on LinkedIn building connections for the future. You're touching on sort of building pipelines. Obviously, at some point, furlough is going to end. And we're all going to go, well, I don't know how it's going to end. Maybe we might not be able to go on holiday for a while. It'll all be very much based in the UK. But, when it comes to returning to work, when it actually goes back to sort of going back to work, you've been building these pipelines. How's that? What are your thoughts on that? I mean, there's all sorts of feelings. There's all sorts of practical realities. There's things on, how do you re-engage your contacts? I mean, I'm assuming during this period, some of you have sort of building up your pipelines. And what are your expectations of returning? So Martin, over to you.
It's a tough one, to be perfectly honest, because you obviously can't plan for that because you don't know when it's happening. As something Simon touched on a little bit earlier around that networking or looking at industries you think might be key for yourself, is one thing I've been doing is interviewing a couple of key leaders within my geographical sales area that are leaders of key industries I think might be the go-to when I return. But in terms of what are my expectations when I return, the honest answer is I don't know, because nobody's got that plan yet, have they? But the one piece of advice I've taken upon myself is I've accepted the reality that I am now in. So I've got my head wrapped around what that looks like. And the reason I've done that is because I don't want to become complacent of what might happen in the future. I've started to ask what if questions of my organization. So what if this should happen? What if that should happen? And start to then paint a picture and draw out a map of where the options potentially are. And finally started to think about the upside. So yes, look, everybody's got things in their life at the moment that are causing stress or challenging. But one of the bright spots in this situation or in a crisis, there is opportunity somewhere. You've just got to look for it, and you've got to be willing to go that extra 1% or find that 1%. And that's where I've really taken my focus.
Okay. Martin, how have you thoughts about returning to work and challenges and mindset? And
do you mean Simon?
Yeah.
Which way we going here, bud?
I probably have to get someone in. Come on.
That's in your head, mate. I think it is. It's maybe a little bit premature for me personally to start thinking too far ahead. Currently furloughed until July. That easily could be extended to August, if not further. So I suppose I'm trying to, as we've just said, keep those goals and those KPIs and those targets realistic rather than trying to think too far ahead. So it would contradict what I've just said. Having said that, there's certainly that plan for that strategy. What Martin's just pointed out is that there is opportunity there, hence me looking at 3 or 4 key markets and really trying to sort of immerse myself into their industries. I think if we sort of separate it out to day one, week one, and then the kind of the long term as a separate piece, the culture and things, day one and week one going back into an organization, I think companies have almost got to almost re-employ, but certainly re-onboard people. And we talked about this quite extensively planning for this webinar, that businesses may have found that actually it doesn't take 3 people to do this job. One person can do it working from home on a 3-day week. There's going to be a loss of opportunity as well as a change of role, of capacity of roles. So I think there's going to be a lot of moving around, a lot of playing Tetris, if you like, of slotting people back in. You've also got to speak to people and actually ask them, how are you feeling? To go for 2, 3, 4 months locked down, maybe not seeing friends and family. I'm sure there's plenty of people, when we talk about the spread and the reach of the ISM, for example, who are on this webinar who have had coronavirus, or certainly some that may know people who have, or even unfortunately lost people who have. And you need to check on those people. They need to be brought back in slowly and not just pushed back into a 40, 50-hour week, which I don't think will be what we'll go back to as the normal. And then finally, for me, it was talking about rediscovering goals. I noticed, and I know we'll do questions at the end, but someone's popped a question up about money being the sole motivator within sales. And I totally agree. It's not the sole motivator. And people's motivations are different, and for others. But I think money certainly comes into it. But what are those goals going to be for people now long term? Is it about, my goal is actually to do 3 days in the office and 2 days working from home? Is that the new goal of what your BDMs or your sales teams might be? So I think, there's a lot within that day one, week one, which isn't just from a sales manager or, sales director's perspective, but also bringing in that HR team and really ensuring that the people are on board, they're mentally well, they're fit, they're ready to go back to work. They understand what's happened. They understand what's expected going forward.
Fab.
Yeah, I mean, I think just to add to that, it's as a leader, obviously there's a lot of practical things that we start thinking about. Are we going to do temperature checks? So, are we going to reduce the number of cubicles on the floor? Or, how is flexible working going to come into play? How does that affect the properties that we have and where we have them and how we engage with the employees? I think the cultural piece is something that we're probably not thinking enough about, that, culture is made up already of how our employees interact, the values that we profess as an organization, the purpose that we lead with, and how we go to market. And those things have been impacted by these changes, and they will be affected by our new ways of working. And so how can we become intentional? How do I, as a leader, think quite intentionally about making the practical changes to keep people safe, and also to recognize that we can be productive from home, and that some people actually need to come in because working at home does not work for them, and align the culture so that it continues to sort of represent those values that we've held dear and that have been important? Or do some of them need to change? And I think that that's also something that we have to ask ourselves. And we do need to engage employees in that dialogue to make sure that we do it in the right way. One of the people asked about, about that being frightened to talk to your work about being furloughed, or some of your concerns as to what's going on. And some people in furlough aren't having any communication with their companies. And I think that that is really difficult. But one of the things that we also talked about, Martin, Simon, and I, is this actually should be a very empowering time for employees. We will all come out of this knowing and having proven that we can actually be productive often and work from home or more on our own terms. We're going to come out and sort of remember that we do like having dinner with our families or being able to have time to exercise. And we probably aren't going to accept anymore someone telling us that we can't do those things, because we know that our mental health is really important, and we've proven that we're resilient. And so I would say, as hard as it is, it gives you control back to have the courage to just bring the conversation up. As a leader, I certainly would welcome an employee asking me the question, and saying, hey, I'm not sure if you think you'll be bringing me back. The reality is the leader probably won't have the answer. They may be able to tell you something like, it would be fair to suspect we might not be able to bring everyone back, understanding that our revenues are significantly lower. But I think when you ask that question, you show two things. You show, one, I do want to come back, so I'd like to know if I'm in your plan. And the other is, I also want you to know that I'm a valued asset. And so I need to be thinking about where, taking care of myself, my family, and my needs. And that's a respectful conversation. So I think that they can be difficult, but I would encourage people to take that on, just to take that for themselves.
I think
outrageous.
I was going to add to that and just say there's a massive piece about communication there.
Why did that happen? Sorry.
Well,
I was just calling.
It's absolutely key. I mean, I think I know there's people who maybe aren't working for quite as decent employers and things like that. Where there's very little communication, or it's not as transparent as maybe other organisations. I think the question there is, if that's a sort of thing that a lot of people are saying, you'll remember those people who you spoke to during furlough. You remember those people who text you every day. You'll remember those people you FaceTimed every week and asked if you were okay. Those true friends and family. And I think a certain amount of that extends to the company's responsibility as well. The businesses need to be checking in on their staff. If they're not, where's the care? Is there real care? Do you want to go back to work for that employer? I think there's got to be a real consideration there, and it doesn't have to be every day. It doesn't have to be a formal Zoom call. I'm very fortunate with my team that we WhatsApp a couple of times a week, and often it's completely unwork related. It's a couple of daft memes, or with my manager about the football, for example, but it's just checking in. It's keeping that relationship going and having that memory to talk about when things go back to normal. So that's absolutely key, is talking people through, so that we're not furlough, and then off the edge of a cliff back into work. That there's a consistency. I look like one of these government charts now with the curve, but there's a curve back into work. It's instigated slowly.
I'm going to ask, and then I'm going to sort of switch off my camera, my audio, and relocate to another part of the house, because I feel like I'm in the middle of Upton Park on a Sunday. But one question I have, if Martin, I know you're about to say something, and you can finish that in a second. But how did you feel about all these companies have let go of employees, not even furloughed them? There are companies I know that I can mention right now on this webinar, but I won't. That I remember on LinkedIn 6 weeks ago, I suddenly got sort of 75 notifications flinging in from people who, from one company, just got let go like that. Not even furloughed, gone. How do you think customers are going to react to re-engaging with these companies? Because I think there's an element of some companies doing their best with you guys and Martin and Simon, not forgetting your names, who keep you guys engaged, keep you guys involved, and make you feel as part of a family. I mean, how awful would it be to join a company and not even be furloughed and let go? Do you think that impacts the customer psyche? While you answer that, I'm going to switch off my camera and my audio and relocate. So I'll see you in a bit. So Martin, over to you.
I think it's a challenge to comment on organisations that you've not got a foot in the door, because you don't know what's happening behind closed doors. So I'd like to reserve judgment on that. But my personal thing is I'd like to see the best in people. So I'd like to think that they have done everything that they possibly can do to support people. But bringing that into an answer is you've got to keep the human element in what we're doing. You've got to remember that it's people at the forefront of these businesses. And without them, you tarnish the brand, or you really could potentially ruin the brand. And from a customer perspective, if I'm thinking personally, and I've seen something in the news that somewhere I personally shop and think they've not necessarily looked after their people the way they should have, maybe it would make me think twice about going back there, because I want to be comfortable that wherever I'm taking myself personally, they're doing the right thing for their people as well. So it's a difficult one.
How would you even employ people? That was really great timing, by the way. But I was ready for a question. But what would that company tell? I mean, I know this isn't, we're going off on a sidetrack, but I'm just kind of exploring it a little bit. How would you, as a company, if you've just let go 70 staff and then you start rehiring again, would you rehire the staff you let go or rehire new people?
I think, sorry.
That's okay.
Smart.
Questions too. I mean, I think Martin said a couple of things that were really important. One, it's difficult to speculate what happens behind closed doors, and we want to think that those leaders who had to make those very difficult decisions did so thoughtfully. And I can only imagine that they had to have a reason. So I'm not trying to make excuses, but I've been in this situation as a senior leader that sometimes you have to make a very decisive decision now, because it actually means saving a lot more problems later. And they're not the decision that anybody really wants to undertake, but it is all in how they're executed. How do you communicate to your employees? How do you tell the customers that you've had to make these changes, which naturally could impact the people that they speak to, that that are your company representatives? How might it impact their service, and sort of what is the brand trying to say to the market? And that's that's probably where companies always have an opportunity to have perhaps done so more thoughtfully and in a more joined up manner. But these decisions are being made quite quickly. And often under quite a lot of pressure, and particularly when they're traded at the city, it's set of circumstances can be very different. And I know employees that we've had to let go, or organizations that ways that we've gone to market that we've decided not to do anymore. What I've found is open, honest, and as transparent as you can be with those employees is always best. And whatever help you can give them to help them re-employ themselves, whether that's recommendations, connecting them in with organizations that might be hiring, and certainly any kinds of packages that you can provide to help them upskill themselves or redo their CVs. Those small gestures, while they don't always work out to help them land on their feet, they show a thoughtfulness. And I think that's what we all want, is to be treated like human beings, because each and every person has obligations, ambitions, and drive. And we need to remember that in these times, especially.
Anyone got any other thoughts on that? Because we've got some questions, which I'd like to go into in a few moments. But before I do that, any other thoughts on that, guys?
Yeah, I think just to add that, obviously, working with recruitment technology at the moment, it's a big part for us about how does that workforce get re-engaged, and how the businesses continue to scale and grow again. There's key areas, as I mentioned, that we're, as a business, and then me personally, we're looking at in order to make sure that we are in the right place, and we are there to support these organisations when that peak does continue and that growth starts again. I think Tamara said when we were planning for this webinar, it's a very sad day when you see salespeople getting let go from businesses, being made redundant. It's a very sad day. Because they're the driving force. We are the driving force of companies. Without us, nothing happens. I think you even had that on the Besma show reel last year, Adam, as well. So it's very, very true. I think, as Martin said, it's you've got to reserve judgment. You don't know the personal circumstances and the full set of circumstances surrounding businesses' decisions and the decisions they've made. But ultimately, it does come down to the treatment of people. Unfortunately, tough decisions have got to be made. People have been and will still continue to be let go, but it's the way in which those businesses complete that difficult task, which I certainly wouldn't envy them and wouldn't want to be in their positions. I think going forward, I think it's about being a lot more explorative and digging deeper into what people's drivers are, what their requirements are, what their experiences of the situation are. I've passed my probation during this time of being on furlough. So it's a very strange circumstances. If I went and applied for another job in a year's time, effectively 60%, 40%, whatever it may be, of my time with that employer, I haven't actually been in work for. So there's lots to consider around CVs and that future going forward. But ultimately, I think I'd like to end it on a positive note that we will get back to normal, or new normal. Companies will hire again. There will be opportunities out there. And companies and individuals have just got to take advantage of those at the right time and be in the right place for them.
Okay. Right. So we've got some questions. So the next sort of phase of this webinar is questions. I will use my discretion of which ones I'll ask. I mean, I've already spotted a few in there, which I love you guys, but I'd never ask you, so don't worry. If there are any questions, obviously the questions I miss out, I'll just get the guys to respond to after this webinar finishes. So if we do miss any, then we'll get you guys to reply. And then after the questions, I'll ask the team here to do some final thoughts, takeaways, final thought messages, and go from there. So questions up until about 11:45, 11:50. Let's go for it. So first question that came in actually was, many people who are furloughed are frightened to talk to their company as they expect to be sacked, having worked there for less than 2 years. Any thoughts on, would you even approach that topic with an employer, or would you try and hide and not be seen? What would you do? Anyone want to take that?
Well, I think I touched on it a little bit earlier, because I saw that question as well. That I think I would absolutely touch on it. I mean, I always believe in talking about the elephant in the room. And yes, organizations have different obligations to employees that have been there for less time. That being said, they want great people. No company wants to lose great talent, and I would certainly not assume because you've been there for under 2 years, that means that you're going to go. Obviously, if you've not performed well and you've sensed that it's not a good fit, then maybe that puts you more at risk. But, you are your own best advocate. So I would absolutely approach my leader. And I would just say, I know that employees like myself who've been in companies under 2 years potentially could be at greater risk. I want you to know I'm committed to being here. I think I've done a great job for you. Would love to know, are you happy with what I've done so far? And kind of remind them of the reasons they hired you in the first place. Will it keep you? Will it not? No one really knows. But in all the leadership roles I've had where we've had to make these kinds of decisions, they usually are never like an all or nothing. You're still looking at the individual people, and you want to keep great talent because great talent's hard to find. So I'd say, have courage and be confident. Everything that got you that job, you still possess and more. You're more skilled, you're more resilient, you're more capable than you were the day you walked in the door. So, just remember that, walk in and have that conversation with courage.
Just to add on to that, yeah, I really liked what Martin said earlier about going to the employer with those what if questions and those scenarios. Something I'm probably even going to take the heed on myself, because I think that a lot of the employers don't know realistically right now, and they maybe can't give you solid answers. But if you go, like you rightly said, Martin, with that what if question, and that's sort of, well, here's a scenario, could you give me an idea of what might be the outcome? I think that's a nice tentative way to approach it, but showing that level of professionalism and that you're also thinking ahead as well.
I think just to add to that as well, you have to understand where that fear is coming from of why are you choosing not to ask? And is it what Tamara said? Is it because subconsciously your performance over whatever that period is hasn't been where it's expected? And are you choosing subconsciously to not ask that question then? And whatever the answer is to that question, you will be in a far better position knowing the answer than not knowing it. And it will give you a clearer headspace. So just by asking it gives you the opportunity to, one, find out whether you're in the plans for the company, or two, if you're not. And if you're not, you can then step back and start to plan what your future looks like, because the most important person in this is you. And if you don't take care of yourself, nobody's going to do it for you. So yeah, just step up and you've got to do it.
It gives you a level of control in the conversation. It might feel minor, but sitting back and waiting, it's like when you're dating, Nobody wants to be broken up with, right? It's easier to do the breaking up, and it sucks all around. But I think it just gives you a chance to take control of the conversation.
We're all salespeople, aren't we? We're trained to ask the difficult questions, so it's just taking that into a different area, you know.
Question for, well, I've got some questions as well, sort of off the fly, really. What are your companies? How are your when this all first kicked off? How quick were your companies, respective companies at the time? I'm aware, Simon, you were kind of in between jobs, or you had a job. Forgive me, I've only had one coffee during this webinar. And Martin, especially with you, I mean, how quick was your company in addressing the fact that this is a tough period for their employees? I mean, what sort of things did they come up with? What works, what didn't? I mean, I'm assuming there was a lot of companies out there that just copied what everyone else was doing, which was the weekly Zoom call or the weekly pub quiz. I mean, what do you have any examples of what your company's been doing that's gone the extra mile, or what have you guys seen in the marketplace that other companies are doing for their employees in this time? I know that Virgin Media are doing some kind of dance off, which, you know, I can't. I've seen all sorts of things, but, you know, what's been working for you, and, you know, what have you seen out there that other companies are adopting to keep their employees, you know, thriving in the period?
I think to go with that, as a leader, you need to understand what motivates each person. So while you can have a collective, that collective effort might not be the right person for every individual. So you've got to almost scale it back and tailor it to each person. Now, for me personally, I'm quite big. I like to spend a lot of time with my partner. I like to spend a lot of time with the animals that I have. And the first thing my manager asks me when she rings is, "How's your partner? How are your pets doing?" and to me, it seems silly, but that resonates a lot with me, because it shows that she cares about me as a person, and she's invested into my personal self, not just about what the company's doing. You can see what the company's doing because you ask them questions yourself, but it's keeping it on a personal level. That, for me, that's the most important thing.
Okay. Tamara, do you have any thoughts on what companies are doing out there, what they're doing right, what they could be doing better?
I've talked to a lot of different organizations, and I am impressed with the leaders that we have out there trying to find new ways to connect with their teams, whether it's, starting a day with a coffee that's not required, and PJs are welcome, so that people feel that flexibility because they're at home, and the scenarios that they might find themselves in may or may not always allow them to participate. Organizations that had often lunches in their lunchrooms on certain days, they'll create those virtual lunches and try and get that sense of community. So it's a lot of the types of things that were mentioned. I think the question will be, how does that transition after the furlough? So some of these things are being done because we're trying to replace what we thought we had, or we're just trying to stay connected. But that style of leadership and engagement doesn't work for everyone. For some people, it's really exhausting. Being on a screen all the time, like when you used to be on conference calls all day long, you weren't being seen. So I do hear about a lot of fatigue that individuals are having to be physically seen all of the time, and almost not having the permission to multitask, which for most of us is part of how we manage our job stress. So I think those are some of the things that haven't worked as well, that we need to also think about, particularly as this time period continues and very few people are actually returning into the office. It might be time to adjust some of the things that maybe haven't worked as well, or are maybe tiring people out, and giving them permission to go off Zoom and, to try and keep people engaged.
I saw one thing someone did on Zoom, which was a pre-recording of themselves as doing this. They weren't they were in the garden or something. And, it was actually an American that did that. Someone in California apparently did it, and the wife spotted it and then grassed him up. So hopefully they're married. Sure. Simon, what are your thoughts on how companies what have you seen in the market? What's your company been doing? What have you liked to see? What have you not really liked?
I think, firstly, from a personal perspective, I joined the company, I say 2 weeks in the office, a week on working from home, and then this happened. I was furloughed. So I think for me personally, first of all, I mentioned grateful for the government, but grateful to that employer. They could have let me go. You know, they had a real reason, a real argument to just be able to go, sorry, wrong time. Particularly when the service we offer relies on businesses growing the headcount, which naturally is one of the first things that's going to get cut when any situation like this arises. So first, I was very grateful for that. I was grateful for the hand on the shoulder, the conversation, knowing that I was part of those long-term goals before we even left the office to work from home. I think following on from that, we had great communication during the time working from home. And then onto the furlough, where we've got a number of our staff still in the office. So a number of the sales team are still working. I had no pipeline, no accounts to manage, obviously being new. So it made sense for me to be one of the furloughed group. Having said that, we've all kind of rallied around each other. You know, we want to see the guys who are still in the office. We want to see them driving forward. They're bringing the revenue in. You know, they're giving us a business to go back to. And I think I really appreciated that when I looked at it from a commercial perspective, having spent time in a director role and understanding the inner workings of a business, not just from a sales perspective, knowing that commercially they were doing everything viable to protect the business, which ultimately protected my role going forward in the future. On an ongoing position, I mean, it hasn't been anything weird, wacky, wonderful. You know, it's been really simple. But to echo what Martin and Tamara have said there, it's been very much about the flexibility and the communication. We've got a mature sales team. We don't need to have a Zoom call at 4:00 every Friday. And that's not right for some people with families or kids or parents that they're looking after, whatever it may be. So we've just become accustomed to being able to have that flexible check-in, a WhatsApp message, a quick email on the personal email, a quick FaceTime. And I've really appreciated that, you know, it's not forced or rammed down your throat. It is flexibility. And it's also casual. It's a genuine concern for how's your day, how's your week been, rather than everyone coming on Zoom and being able to get away with a pre-recorded one of these, which essentially means that no one really cares how you feel on that call if you're able to get away with that. So yeah, I think flexibility, communication, they've been the two key things for me that have really made me feel valued by that employer.
Fab. Well, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to invite ahead of time everyone here to have some sort of final takeaway messages, final thoughts. I'm going to give each presenter maybe 2-3 minutes to just give some ideas, final what was your final message for everyone watching this webinar around the world? Quite literally, we've got people from Dubai, people from the Middle East, people from Singapore, someone in Hawaii, which isn't a bad place to be in lockdown. Right. It's a tough life. I mean, credit to them if they're watching this, because it's probably, I don't know what time it is over there, but well done. Final messages, and then we'll look at wrapping this up. But Tamara, how do you feel about taking the lead on this? What final messages would you like to impart on our audience?
I think this is a time that we can begin to doubt ourselves. You know, many of us are invested in trying to upskill or keep ourselves busy, but I think it's also a time when we can doubt and worry. And I guess I want to encourage the people that are listening to remember that, you know, you have all the skills that you need that got you this job. You are a valued employee, even if you can't stay employed where you are, and to remind yourself of all of the capabilities. One of the things I encourage when I mentor people to do is, you know what, sit down and write down all the successes that you've had. Keep track even now of the things that you're doing that are small successes and put them in a note on your laptop. When you have those low days, you go in and look at the things you've smashed, where you've knocked it out of the park, the ways you've bettered yourself, whether they're personal or professional. You know, we have to quiet the inner critic. And I think it's a particularly important thing to do at this time. We have all built more resilience as a result of this crisis. Resilience is a critical skill in sales, certainly. And, you know, we are used to losing more than we win, right? The odds are usually not as much in our favor when we have to deal that we lose. So just grab a hold of that, because it's something you already possess, and don't let this little thing kind of get you down. And I guess the other thing would be, whilst it's tough to be the employee on the outside because there's change and transition ways of engaging with customers that you might be missing and not have that your peers are having. Remember, it can also be hard to see the people still working because whilst they're getting 100% of their pay generally, their job is, they're probably doing 110% of their job, and they might feel a bit more pressure. So to the extent that it's very hard for those of us that are on the outside, I don't think it's all roses to be on the inside, and just keeping us all human, I think just is going to make that return to work, whatever that means, that much easier. So those would be some of my closing thoughts. Stay positive.
Okay. Simon.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to sound too much like a parrot because I think, you know, a lot of it's very similar. We're all going to have similar thoughts on this. I think there's two perspectives from this. We're obviously going to have people on this webinar who are furloughed, and we're going to have employers and leaders, I hope, who've got furloughed staff who are maybe just wondering from a neutral perspective what the feelings and emotions that their furloughed staff are going through at the moment. So I think for those guys, it's not too late to put an arm around the shoulder. We've all mentioned several times on this call that the communication and the transparency are absolutely key. You know, you may not have spoken to those furloughed employees for a week, 2 weeks, a month. You know, they may have not spoke to you since the news came out that this is potentially going to go on to October. If you're their manager, if you're the company owner of a smaller business, I'd implore you today to pick up the phone, send them a text, give them a call, whichever way it is that you know. And I'm not expecting you to go out to them with the answers and be able to say, this is when we're going to bring you back. But talk to them a little bit about what you are doing. What's the plan? What are you thinking? Where do they fit into that plan? And I think that's fair to the employee. And I think that will also give yourself some self-satisfaction that you've done the right thing, and take that burden off your shoulders a little bit, because I'm under no illusion that for company owners and leaders, this is a very difficult time as well. And I think often they can be forgotten. So yeah, have that conversation. I think there's a feel-good factor and a benefit from both sides. That'd be the first thing. For the furloughed employees, look, you were hired for a reason. As Tamara says, look, sales professionals of the sort of caliber and quality that we talk about are hard to come by. Everyone thinks salespeople are 10 a penny, but they're not for that sort of caliber. So you were hired for a reason. Have confidence in yourself of the reasons why you were hired and the value that you bring to that organization. In the downtime, become the pro. You know, look at those industry targets of the companies. Become the professional within those industries. If you're more junior in sales, do spend some time on L&D and sales training. There's an ample amount out there through the ISM, through different webinars, through blogs, through podcasts, and also strategize. One of the things that I'm speaking to a friend about is the boxers when they're training, they're not trained to punch someone in the face. They're trained to punch through that other boxer, their opponent. Footballers are trained to kick through a ball. Don't worry, Adam, I'm going somewhere with this.
You can see the eyebrows.
I'm going. Where are you going? And then finally, snipers. The best snipers in the world, they don't shoot the target. They shoot where the target's going to be. And the point on this is, stop worrying so much about today and now. The best people are always hitting those invisible goals. So look at those invisible goals, make some assumptions about what your market might look like. You're not going to get it 100% right. We're not all, experienced economic professionals, okay? We're not going to necessarily know, but have 3 or 4 markets maybe that you're going to look at, that you're thinking about, that are those invisible goals for 3-6 months' time, and start to immerse yourself in them. Be shooting for that invisible target. I told you I was going somewhere. And apart from that, just support those around you. And as a last thing, maybe a little bit, I said there's other people who are going to work and do 110% of the work at the moment, but actually try and enjoy the time off a little bit. I've worked in sales for over a decade, and it's non-stop, it's fast-paced, it's go, go, go. I've actually felt more relaxed. I felt my blood pressure a bit lower. I've been able to do some of the things that I enjoy. start to accept that this is what's happening at the moment and actually make the most of it, because we're never going to get 80% pay for all this time off in the world again. And I know that we all want to see friends and family and go back to work and see colleagues, but ultimately this is the situation that we're in, and we have to make the best of that situation. That's the whole purpose of this webinar. So try and enjoy the little bits that you can, whether it's being sat in the park on a Wednesday afternoon when you'd usually be in the office, whether it's FaceTiming your nan who maybe you don't speak to often enough. Enjoy and cherish and remember those moments.
Martin?
Yeah, I think we touched on before this started, and you mentioned something about looking at learning a language. And for me, what I see a lot of people doing is they compare themselves to other people. And there's a problem with that, because you don't know where they are in their journey and you don't know what their goals are. So you've got to really strip everything back and think, what's important to you? And really don't force anything that you're not committed to. Well, that's sort of tip one. But the way I've really looked at this is I've just been given a completely blank canvas. And just like when you start a new job, you can choose whoever and whatever you want to be. So this is the exact same situation. This is a once in 100-year opportunity potentially. And not only do you have the opportunity to believe in change, you're also given an opportunity to drive change. So think about how you can bring that back into either your personal and professional life.
Okay. Well, look, we have had a huge response to the webinar. A lot of people are attending this all over the world. I'd like to thank very much. I think they all, I say this on every webinar, and it's not beyond truth, but Tamara, Martin and Simon deserve an OBE for putting up with me in preparing this. And you know, this is our third in the series. It's not easy to. I mean, they've basically said what to do on the tin, how to work from home and how to thrive and follow. They all got together. Unless I'm mistaken, none of you really knew who each other were before this all started. And I kind of all put them together. Martin did join, and then within sort of 30 seconds, I went, "Welcome, by the way." I don't think he was expecting such a quick response, but it happened when he worked from home. Had him on LinkedIn done. He's regretting it right now, but you know, this is what it's all about: getting together, people exchanging ideas and thoughts and things like that, and just sharing it with the world. No sales push, no kind of join our company, more kind of listening to the stories behind how your struggles are going. And I think you've done that all superbly. If anything, I've learned to brush my hair a bit more before I've done this webinar. But what will happen now is this will be placed on demand once I end the webinar. I'll send you the video recordings to each of you so you can do with it what you wish. But thank you very much for your time. It has been very much appreciated. If some of the questions that did come through, I'll make sure they're answered. I'll send them over to all three of you, because I can't still remember your names, and make sure that no one's forgotten. But I'm hoping that they will come back. Yeah, very, very thankful for their time and putting this together. It was not easy, I'm assuming. Yeah, but it's a goodbye for me. Everyone else, want to say your goodbyes, and then I'll end it. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Cheers, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Cheers. Bye.